Hi, my name is Danny Clark. I'm a lead systems engineer in the financial services insurance team here at Citrix in the UK. In this short session today, I'm going to talk about why here at Citrix we believe that AVD and Citrix Cloud is the future of hybrid infrastructure for your end user computing workloads. So first up, just a quick primer on what AVD is and how Citrix Cloud complements and extends what Microsoft are doing with that platform. So just by way of a level set in terminology, AVD, to my mind, is comprised of three key components. First one is the AVD control plane. So this is the management layer. It's brokering, load balancing, web access, reporting, etc. The second one is the AVD workloads themselves. So this is effectively a special subscription within the Azure AVD tenant, which gives you some specific advantages and benefits. So the first one of those is that you get your virtual machines at a preferential rate. So we call it like the Linux rate or the bare metal rate. And that's because your OS has already been taken care of as part of your Microsoft licensing, which we'll come on to in a second. The second thing is the ability to run Windows 7 with extended support, Windows 10, now Windows 11. But the biggest kind of attraction for most of our customers is Windows 10 and Windows 11 multi-session. So this really is the best of both worlds between a desktop operating system like Windows 10, which is great user experience, great application compatibility, but can be very expensive to run in cloud, even with the advantages of AVD, versus Server OS, which is highly scalable, but can introduce problems around user experience, flexibility, and app compatibility. So Windows 10 multi-session or Windows 11 multi-session now sits smack bang in the middle, giving you pretty much all the advantages of Windows 10 with nearly all of the scalability of Server OS. And the final component is the sort of license entitlement, really. So this is kind of for my customers, certainly in FS&O, we almost take it for granted that our customers have the appropriate E3 or E5 licensing entitlement, which grants them access to the platform. So given how good AVD is, you may ask why you still need Citrix. And we think there's four key value areas where we take the work that Microsoft's done and kind of extend and improve it. So the first of those is functionality. So there's a bunch of technology or range of technology that Citrix bring to bear to give customers more choice, more flexibility, address more use cases. So hybrid and multi-cloud is certainly the biggest one here, and obviously it's part of the subject of this session today, is the ability for a single control plane, Citrix Cloud, to enable customers to deploy, manage, support workloads, not just in AVD, but also in their existing data center or perhaps another cloud, Colo, or wherever they like, really, pretty much anywhere around the world. So this is really key because that might be strategic. It might be that a customer has a decision as a strategy to have workloads on-prem as well as cloud for all sorts of good reasons. It might be due to risk avoidance. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket with Azure, or it might be down to the workloads that you're operating that need to be close to the back-end data and back-end systems, etc., that the users are consuming. It might be tactical, so it might be that there is an objective to put everything in cloud, but existing workloads are on-prem. So you might want to move over time, either to do a smooth transition or to sort of get the best out of the workloads and the existing investment you've made in return. We also have things like remote PC, which has been really successful during COVID. So lots of our customers who had to do a very rapid response to work from home requirements back in last March took users who were sat next to a physical PC, sent them home, enabled remote PC, enabled them to access from any device. And that worked really well. And we had customers who deployed tens of thousands of users in a matter of days. But now in return to work, it's also coming to the fore because when people are coming back into the office, they don't necessarily want to sit next to that same PC again. So it might stay under the desk, but the user might sit somewhere else, or they might take that PC and put it in a rack or put it in another room somewhere and have more sort of flexible working options in the office. We have things like universal ID support, so the ability to consume things like Okta or Azure AD as your authentication model. We've got things like app layering, machine creation services, and provisioning services that are all around making it as easy as possible for you to manage, deploy, scale out your required workloads. We've got things like Teams optimization now. You can do that with AVD, but with AVD you're limited to a Windows endpoint, whereas with Citrix you can use Linux, Chrome, and Mac. The next area is cost optimization, and I'll show you some of this in the calculator later. But this is where we can dispel the myth that if you put Citrix on top of AVD, you start with AVD, you add this expensive overlay on top, and you have to add the cost of those two platforms together to get your kind of project price. What we can do is show that with technologies like WEM, MCSIO, HDX, etc., we can significantly reduce the cost of the workloads that you're deploying in AVD. We've got things like auto-scale for intelligent management, including things like bursting to cloud anywhere needed. We've got reduced network traffic generated through HDX protocol. We've got some real advantages around the operational costs of running the platform, the time taken to resolve user issues, etc. From a security perspective, again, AVD is great, but we extend that in a number of key areas. We can do user behavior analytics. We can do endpoint protection. We can do contextual access policies, things like clipboard mapping and controls, navigation controls, watermarking. We can do secure internet access through our SIA product. We can do secure browsing either through an embedded hardened browser on the endpoint or through our secure browser service hosted in our cloud tenant. So again, it's just taking what Microsoft's done and kind of taking it up a notch. And then finally, user experience, which is really key. Most of my customers now are really focusing on the user experience. Now that people are sort of starting to work from home, they need that working environment to be engaging and productive. So things like our intelligent workspace, the ability to access from pretty much any device, pretty much any peripheral, using our EDT transport to make sure that the user experience is optimized regardless of the quality or the variances experienced in the network connection. We have native browsing experience, ability to deliver SaaS and web apps securely with single sign-on directly to the endpoint or through the published sort of desktop or browser. So the admin experience, so improving the life of the administrator as well. So AVD is great; it's improved massively since it was released. But still, I would say that the Citrix pane of glass from our cloud.com control plane is significantly easier to administer than the native AVD experience. So how does Citrix technology extend AVD? Well, this diagram shows a sort of conceptual, it's not a technical diagram, but conceptual overview of AVD. So we have users connecting over the IDP protocol from a fairly wide range of clients these days through the AVD control plane, through the brokering and load balancing into the AVD subscription where their applications and desktops live. The infrastructure is obviously managed by Microsoft, and the customer may or may not choose to create a network connection back to their on-prem data center through ExpressRoute or site-to-site VPN for things like application data and authentication, etc. So in simple terms, that's what AVD looks like. When Citrix Cloud is introduced to the mix, what happens is we effectively kind of ignore Microsoft's control plane and introduce our own, and that's a range of services that we bring to bear. So there are a number of services that comprise Citrix Cloud. The one that's most kind of like for like with AVD is our virtual apps and desktop service, or what many of you might have thought of as XenApp or Zen Desktop in old terminology. So this is the cloud-hosted management layer for that delivery of applications and desktops. But as you can see on the diagram, there's a range of other services. We have our gateway service, we've got endpoint management, we've got two analytics services, we've got workspace service, we've got secure browser service, we've got app protection service, we've got auto-scale. So there's a number of things that we introduce into the equation once Citrix Cloud is in play. Then what we do is we introduce new capabilities within the subscription itself, and these are all designed to optimize the delivery of workloads and applications. So things like app layering, provisioning services, machine creation services, etc. And that's all powered by Autoscale. So that's the ability to really intelligently consume workloads on demand or by schedule. We've also got new technology called the Image Portability Service, which is coming to help with the migration of workloads into cloud. So take your on-prem golden image and strip out any hardware drivers and specifics to your data center, then move that into Azure or another cloud for that matter. So there's some real intelligence there, and we couple that with our performance analytics service to really drive intelligent action in your subscription. Next thing we do, as I mentioned earlier, is hybrid cloud. So this is connecting your on-prem workloads, including legacy 6.5 through aggregation, and presenting all those on-prem workloads through the same workspace to the user. So they're none the wiser, and as you move workloads around based on the any changes to the back-end infrastructure and suitability for particular workloads to move up to cloud, you can kind of consume them all through the single interface as a user. HGX now replaces RDP, and what that brings is a much better user experience. Although RDP again has improved dramatically over the last couple of years, HGX still brings new features, new capabilities. We've got our ADT transport, we've got session recording, session shadowing, Teams optimization on non-Windows devices. We've got the Intelligent Workspace app, secure browser service, 3D acceleration, browser content redirection. There's all these things that HGX facilitates that makes for the best possible choice and best possible experience for the user. Multi-cloud is just the natural extension of hybrid cloud. So this is the ability to deploy a workload wherever you want in the world, install a couple of cloud connectors, spin up your VDAs, and provision workloads from wherever they're best suited. ID providers, we've got multiple choices now in terms of how you authenticate your users. Use your Google login, use Okta, Ping, SAML, whatever flavor is appropriate, including new kind of adaptive options now, so we can change your authentication models based on the context of the user. And then SaaS apps, and this is really important because many of my customers or many organizations have this perception that as they move to more SaaS applications, there's less and less requirement for Citrix. And that's only really true if you think of Citrix in a kind of old school way of thinking of us as just being a VDI provider. So what we're able to do now is deliver SaaS and web applications very intelligently, very securely in a number of ways. So we have our SIA product, we've got our SWA product, we have the ability to use our secure browser service, we've got secure browsing on the endpoint. So what we're able to do is give you choice around how your SaaS apps are delivered, provide the user with a single sign-on, provide analytics and insights in terms of what they're doing. We can apply things like watermarking. We can do copy, paste, print, and navigation protection. And all these things combine to give the best solution overall, including cost optimization, because what we can do is if we deliver that web app to the endpoint and execute it on the end user's device, then we can increase the user density in the cloud tenant and actually improve your cost modeling there as well. So in summary, really, the combination of these benefits is designed with a few simple points in mind. One is to simplify your adoption of cloud, drive productivity and user engagement, and saving money. So on that final point, I'm just going to jump into a tool that we developed here internally at Citrix to help customers understand what AVD might cost them, what Citrix might cost them, and then what the two might cost together, which isn't as simple as add the AVD and Citrix licensing costs together, because when Citrix is involved in the solution, we bring those technologies into play to reduce the cost of that AVD. So it's not A plus B equals C, as you'll see now. So here we have the Citrix Cloud and AVD cost estimating tool. And I will emphasize the word estimating because it is exactly that. It's designed as a broad brush illustration of what we think an AVD style deployment might cost, what your Citrix licensing might cost, and then what the two might cost together once we've taken into account some of the savings. But it is based on our own testing, Microsoft testing, third-party testing, but it is averages and projections and estimates and assumptions. So don't take figures as a quote, but hopefully it will give you some food for thought in terms of what it might mean for your particular environment. So what we can do here is we can determine up to 4 what are called personas or use cases or groups of users. So in this example, I've got some call center users. I've got 1,000 of those running a server operating system at a medium workload. I've got some third-party users. They might be sort of business process optimization consultants, or it might be support engineers or whatever. They're coming in to a Windows 10 multi-session, again medium. And then I've got some back office users running Windows 10. A couple of parameters here. We can set auto scale on or off, reserved instances on or off, include operating costs, which I'll come back to, Azure monitoring costs, RDS count, etc. The tool will determine what it thinks is the right licensing edition for you based on your server choice up here. So in this case, we're running CPAD service, default premium edition, user and device licenses for 1,500 users over a 3-year period. And we've illustrated that in pounds. And immediately what the tool will do is it will show you what it thinks your consumption, your average consumption would be over a 36-month term based on a few parameters like 260 hours working month, running on the Azure South, UK South, Azure pricing, etc. So there's our consumption cost. We've got some RDS license costs to take into account because we've got this server operating system up here. So there's a native AVD cost here of 883. We've got a Citrix licensing cost of almost exactly £500,000. That's based on CVAD Edition Premium, as I say, 1,500 users over 3 years list price. So you'd be quite right to think that your solution is going to cost 1.385 thousand. So what I can illustrate is that we think, given this scenario, just off the bat, with no further kind of tweaking, there's around £367,000 worth of savings on the table here. So that's made up of consumption savings. So that's illustrated in this pie chart over here. So this is compute, networking, storage, and monitoring, and some auto scale savings. And that's we've done a fairly basic kind of auto scale assumption that a customer is not daft enough to run all their workloads 24/7 on pay-as-you-go pricing, but is instead going to power all their machines on, on day one, and then each night or in out of hours operations will power off, let's say 85% of the machines, leave a few machines running for out of hours usage, and then power them back on again. Whereas auto scale will be a bit more intelligent and will react to user demand. So when we combine those figures, we get a 366 saving. So a joint proposition cost of 1.08 million or 1.01. So that represents approximately 50% uplift versus AVD native, or £135,000, which over 3 years for 1,500 users works out around £2.50 per user per month. So we take that as a starting point. What we can then look at is what are the benefits you as a customer are going to get for that money. So this chart just illustrates below the line is the spend, above the line is some of the advantages that you might be able to gain from that. So we've got our technical benefits, which is what I talked about in the earlier part of the session. So that, hybrid cloud, HDX, device support, Teams optimization, etc. But then we've got things like, the operational efficiencies, the enhanced security, the user engagement, user experience, hybrid multi-cloud capabilities, the option to bring into play other add-ons like security and performance analytics, app protection, SIA, etc. So we can see that for £2.50 a month, there is some great value there. But what we can now do is start looking at this scenario and see if there's anything we can do to optimize it. So if I scroll across here, you can see this compute cost by persona chart. You can see that our back office users are very expensive compared to our call center users and our third-party users combined. And that's because they're running Windows 10. So even with the benefits of the bare metal VM costs of AVD, Windows 10 is still very expensive to run. So what we can illustrate is what happens when you move from Windows 10 to Windows 10 multi-session. Now, not everyone can move, but just for the purposes of an illustration, if we look at the figures here, our AVD cost starts at 883. If we go to Windows 10 multi-session, drops to 558, so sort of £330,000 almost saving from moving 150 users to a Windows 10 multi-system operating system. What we can then do perhaps is look at our call center users and say, well, look, I've got most of my other users are on Windows 10 multi-session. Why don't I consider putting these guys on that as well? And what you can see is, or what you will see is your consumption costs will go up slightly because Windows 10 multi-session is not quite as efficient or scalable as Server OS, but you will lose your RDS cal costs. So this 558 now would become 495. So there's another saving there. What we could also see is that now that you're running a completely multi-user operating system, you may actually only need our virtual apps service, not just virtual apps on desktops. So our license costs has come down. You might also choose or look to see that you don't necessarily need all the advantages or all the features of our premium edition software. So we can model what it would look like if you went to an advanced edition. And now, just by making those few tweaks, the overall proposition has dropped significantly. We're now looking at a joint total proposition cost of around 471, which is actually cheaper than native AVD at 495. So again, these are broad brush numbers, but you could be looking at a 5% saving when you've combined the technologies versus AVD alone, which is represents a 45 pence per user per month saving overall, or £16 per user over the 3-year period. And obviously there's some fairly sort of broad assumptions and simplifications here. This assumes you start on day one and put everyone in AVD for 3 years, etc. And obviously you wouldn't do that in the real world, but hopefully it just kind of illustrates some of the points here. And what you can also see is that because we've achieved an ROI of greater than 100%, you could take that £24,000 and spend it on, keep it, save it, spend it on some consultancy, some onboarding, engagement, or actually what you could do is you could use that budget to pay for an expansion. You could actually support more users, in this case 77 additional users, for the same budget. So not only are you getting a better overall experience, more functionality, more security, better user experience, but actually getting more users for that same 495 figure here. So obviously this is a very quick introduction. By all means, follow up with us if you've got a scenario that you'd like to model. Get in touch with your account manager over at Bytes or here at Citrix. I'm more than happy to discuss that with you. So hopefully today's session giving you a bit of a flavour in terms of why we think Citrix and AVD are the sort of most natural partners for your cloud-hosted workloads. And with that, I shall thank you for your time and hope you enjoy the rest of the event.